Welcome, everybody. We are in week 9, and tonight we'll be focused on entomology for Green School. I'm Katie Dunker, one of your hosts, and also the Colorado Master Gardener Statewide Coordinator. Happy to have you all with us tonight. We've got a great lineup. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you all a heads up. I think we've mentioned this before on other Zooms, but I wanted to make sure that you all were invited to some upcoming extension webinars on gardening that are free. We did this last year. We just had a great time with it and a lot of positive response. So Fridays at noon, starting March 19th, you can join colleagues from across the state, and many of the speakers are featured professionals who you have met through Green School. And so I think you'll have fun maybe diving into some different horticultural topics that we didn't cover on Green School, or some more specificity than we have during Green School. So this will be kind of fun. They are free. You're welcome to share this broadly. And so if you haven't joined the CSU cohorts blog as a subscriber to get the weekly emails or bi-weekly emails, I would suggest you do that, and I can pop that link into the chat a little bit later. So check these out. These are an awesome opportunity. One of my co-hosts tonight, Lisa Mason, she has a project and opportunity that you all can participate in, and I'm going to let her share a little bit more about the Native Bee Watch program that she started in Colorado.
Hi everybody, welcome. My name is Lisa Mason and I'm the horticulture agent in Arapahoe County. My background is in entomology. I love insects, and one project that I started actually as a master's student was a citizen science project monitoring native bees and the plants that they visit. So this program is actually open to master gardeners and the public. This can be a great way to get hours when we're all working virtually in a pandemic. So if you're interested in this, please ask your master gardener coordinator. We're collecting data on the bees and the flowers they pollinate, and also social science research. We have a goal of making researching best practices in citizen science to inform other extension citizen science projects. So my email's at the bottom if you're interested, and if you'd like to learn more about the program, please visit the website or get in touch with me.
Just the perfect week to highlight this program, Lisa, since I'm sure many people went through the course. And after tonight and tomorrow, we'll be even more jazzed about insects and other arthropods.
Well, last summer was our first summer creating a virtual program, and we received great feedback. So I encourage you to get involved. And I also want to introduce Carol O'Mara. She is my co-host with me. She also has a background in entomology and is the horticulture agent in Boulder County. And then last but not least, our featured speaker tonight is Dr. Whitney Cranshaw. And we're very lucky to have him. Dr. Whitney Cranshaw is a CSU professor emeritus and former extension specialist in entomology. He served in his role for 37 years, retiring recently in 2020. Despite retirement, Dr. Cranshaw continues to serve as a CSU instructor and as an invited guest speaker across the country. During his career at Colorado State, Dr. Cranshaw pursued a broad-based research program largely related to integrated pest management of all arthropods affecting horticulture commodities in Colorado, in particular with vegetables, shade trees, turf grass, and specialty crops. Luckily, he intends to continue his work on entomology-related projects that interest him the most, and that includes biological control of Japanese beetle, pin oak kermes and drippy blight, and hemp entomology. The Colorado Master Gardener program is a longtime fan of Dr. Cranshaw and his relevancy to identifying and appropriately managing garden pests and pollinators. He has educated and entertained thousands of master gardeners for the last 3 decades, and his work lives on in extension offices across the state through numerous books and fact sheets that he has authored on garden insects. So welcome, Dr. Cranshaw. We're so excited to have you here, and it's going to be a great night learning about insects.
Well, right here, Master Gardener is always my favorite program. I miss doing it in person, but let's try this out. So,
Speaking of in person, I do think we need to explain the red Converse, because one of Dr. Craneshaw's living living legacies is that in the past, when we've hosted in person, you will find Dr. Craneshaw in a leather jacket and red Converse. And I don't know if you want to share any more about the story, but it's a defining aspect of part of your teaching.
well, I always have been wearing red Connies since high school, and so it goes way back, and I never stopped. They've gone in and out of fashion a lot, but I just like them. But however, I have to admit, this is the first time I've ever done this without a pair of red Connies. I'm in my slippers tonight. But if this was live, I'd break out a new box for you. So I'm going to. So should I start?
Looks good. You're ready to go.
Okay. So the program for tonight, I'm not sure how this is going to work, but I picked a couple of topics, and we can pick some others for tomorrow. But this is what I'm ready for tonight, and we'll not get through all of it. But what I first want to do is just it's kind of boring, but I want to show you what's on the Insect Information website. Tomorrow, I might have time to show you some other websites that I think you should be aware of. But some other things we could talk about tonight, if we have time. The murder wasp thing, that was the bug of the year thing all last year. I could do something on that. Leafcutter bees, although Lisa Mason does that as well. Miller moss, that was a big issue last year. Hornworms, hummingbird moss, earwigs, mantids, weird things that get grasshoppers, the pigeon tremex and the giant ichneumon wasp, painted ladies, lady beetles. So I kind of have this is kind of a tale of 10 insects. So these are kind of 10 topics I picked. And I'll probably, maybe you could, put in the Q&A what you might want to hear next. But I'm going to do this introduction to the website first, get the boring part out of the way. So there is a insect information website in the department that I'm still associated with. It's now called Agricultural Biology. And if you can find this page, and you might want to then link it on your computer. So the page, when you come to it, looks like this. This is the front part of the page. But when you go to this first part, the arthropods of insects section, and you hit that button, this fact sheet button, then over 200 sheets show up. And the only way you're going to find many of these is if you go to this site and click on that button. In this section of the website, there are insects and other arthropods arranged by taxa. So it's by name of the order. So it does happen to show certain spiders at the beginning, but it's insects, spiders, other arthropods. In this, you'll see sheets that have numbers on them, like spiders in the home, right at the beginning. Those are formal extension fact sheets, and they would look like this. Spiders in the home happens to be the first one there. It's also, this, by the way, is the by far biggest moving fact sheet in the history of CSU. 250,000 downloads of this a year are not uncommon. But many of them don't have a number, and the ones that don't have a number are ones that are just, I wrote. I didn't go through the system to make it a fact sheet, and they get changed more frequently. So the second one happens to be one of my favorite spiders, the cat face spider. So that would be there. Or you go on the other side, and there's another one, the masked hunter, that doesn't have a little number next to it. And what's that look like? That's this funny insect that comes into houses. The young stage covers itself with lint and is like little walking dust balls. Anyway, there's 200 of these sheets. And the only way you're going to find them, or most of them, is by going there. The second button, the second section, is just miscellaneous stuff. And this is just things that, I just threw in because they didn't fit anywhere else. So when you hit the resources button, then this is what comes up. Colorado bug mugs, I'll show you that. A listing of the over-the-counter insecticides. I've got several things on mystery bites and invisible itches because we get a lot of questions on that subject. Also, life in a Colorado water garden. So again, the first one, Colorado bug mugs, is a binder that has about, I think it's 44 individual sheets in a binder that was originally done to cover what we hoped would be 95% of all the insects that come into a county office. So these would be one-page cheat sheets. Most of them are not plant related, and much of what I've always had to do is not plant related insects, it's household insects. But there's that, and you could download that at that site. There's also a publication that we did several years ago, just, you know, what's the life in a water garden? There's some interesting insects in a Colorado water garden. So we did a little study, and I don't think there's a publication like this anywhere else, but the only way you're going to find it is go to that website. Then there's different big topic subjects. So there's a section on emerald ash borer. And so if you click information there, there's some a series of links to resources, I think, related to emerald ash borer that I like, and a lot of them happen to be in different states. There's one Japanese beetle gets used a lot. You hit the resources button, again, there's a whole long series of various kinds of links. There's another one for bed bug I forgot to put on there. Bees, lots of things on bees, including many of Lisa's wonderful publications. So links on how to see those, and some other websites or associations or in-state and out-state publications that I like on that subject. And this is always changing. I'm going to be doing quite a bit of addition to this in the next 2 weeks. The whole CSU website's been down for about 3 months, and we're just getting back up. Hemp insects, well, it's not a Master Gardener thing, but we do have the only hemp insect website if you're interested in that subject. If you want to go there, we have individual fact sheets on hemp insects. You go to that button. Everything we find in a hemp field in Colorado, we try to write a sheet about it. Okay, and then towards the end, Master Gardener information. What we have there is, this is where I park the things that I normally use in a typical year, which is not typical this year, wasn't typical last year, in Master Gardener programs. So under handouts, there's 3 handouts I always would give out. One was on sources of biological control organisms, where you can find them, what their use is in Colorado. Another is resource list of insects, and that's, you know, good websites I like, good books I like, where to get insect collecting equipment, just stuff. And then insecticide trade names is a survey I do every year, every 3 years. I visit 3 box stores, 3 hardware stores, and 3 nurseries in Fort Collins, and I keep a list of everything I see on the shelves being sold by trade name, and then I organize it by active ingredient, because most of our recommendations are based on active ingredient. And this list, you know, if you can look at active ingredient and see these are the 20 products that have that active ingredient in it. The next thing would be the PowerPoints that I used last year. These are PDFs of the PowerPoints I used in 2020. And then I also, last year, because we got a truncated year, I did a couple of supplements for the Master Gardener program. And I think you've already been linked to these, the Guess Who Came to Dinner series and the Gardening for Insects or Not. And then finally, there is a series of calendars that I did that are, it was try to give an idea of when certain things happen through the year in different parts of the state. And a typical one looks like this. And what I would like is for you to take these yourself and change them for yourself. I mean, I think these need to be done locally. I can, you know, with the ones that you could pull down from that website, you can get a good start on this. Anyway, do it yourself. And anyway, so that's it for the website introduction, the boring part. So the not sure what to do next. I think I will maybe pick. Let's get it out of the way because let's see. Sorry, share screen. The bug of the year last year issue. So this is kind of the other ones are a little more organized differently, but every year there's something. And last year, I would say the bug of the year wasn't even a bug that's in Colorado. It was the whole public, I don't know, just a big deal about the Asian giant hornet, the murder hornet, and Coloradans responded very strongly to this report in the news. It was found in Washington State. So let's a little bit about this. This was a story that started a little less than a year ago. The first real break was a New York Times story on May 2nd that came out. And I'll never forgive the New York Times for using the term murder hornets. That was, I expect better of them than that. But anyway, they did it, and it took off. And it got repeated in the internet, and it was a big deal all summer. And the typical internet stories would be something like you see on the right, which is a photoshopped, make it look way bigger than it is kind of story. Some of them looked even bigger than that in the internet. Can't trust everything on the internet, I hope you know. But this was an insect that was found in Washington State. It is a very large hornet, a Vespa species. That's the kind of insects we call true hornets are in this genus. There are none native to North America, but there has been a very big one in Eastern North America since the mid-1800s, the European hornet, and that's a big one. Nobody ever talks about that, but that one came in through New York City in mid-1800s. Boy, if it came through in New York City in 2021, we'd hear a lot about it. The Asian giant hornet is a social wasp. It produces colonies that last one season. A lot of our social wasps, this is the way they do it, yellow jackets, paper wasps, they make a brand new colony every year, surviving only as queens between seasons. It is a species that is adapted to low elevation, moist forests, and it feeds as a predator. It eats other insects. It eats lots of kinds of large insects. It eats beetles, katydids, various kinds of social wasps, social bees. Probably if it was here, I bet it would really like to feed on the European paper wasp. But what everybody hears about is that it also eats honeybees. It does eat honeybees, among many other things, and it's managed in the areas where it exists, which is parts of Asia. Now, the stories came out, and all through the summer, people turned in insects that they thought were murder wasps. And there are various kinds of pretty large waspish-like things that we have in Colorado and always have had in Colorado. So let's kind of go through what we had turned into the offices last year. The two big groups that were turned in last year were a kind of unusual group of wood-boring wasps called horntails, and a group of large wasps that hunt cicadas, the cicada killers. So the first thing that people turned in were horntails. And horntails are a kind of insect that I never have talked about in Master Gardener. It's a pretty obscure group. They develop in dying trees. None of them are primary pests. Most of them are in conifers. But the wasps are fairly big, kind of elongate, got a round tubular body, And the females will have a spike on the hind end that they use to insert eggs underneath the bark. We have 10 species of them in Colorado. Most of them are found in the forests, in the native forests, and people never notice them unless, they come out of some firewood or something like that. But last year, everybody was looking for things, and people had time on their hand, and they saw a lot of stuff. That was a real part of last year, is people noticed things way more last year because they had more time and they spent more time in their garden. But the first one that came in June, big surge of a wasp that I didn't even think of was very common. I've only seen it maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, but a lot of this wasp that comes out of dead pines was being turned in as murder wasps. And again, it's a totally innocuous insect. Doesn't kill trees. It develops in dead or dying trees, and certainly can't sting. Although it does. Again, the females of horntails have this long spike on the hind end that does look kind of scary, but it's used again to house the ovipositor. The most common of the horntails that we have is one that develops in deciduous trees, and we have only one, and that comes out in late summer, called the pigeon tremex. And I'm going to talk more about that one. Pigeon tremex is the only horntail in Colorado that develops in deciduous hardwood trees, so it particularly comes out of things like silver maple, elm, ash. And here's one ovipositing in an ash tree right here. So you can see that structure that's used to lay eggs. And this is an ash tree that is in serious shape. It's in seriously bad shape. It's you can't see it just below where I photographed this or put the video. It's been whacked by a weed whacker. Plus, it's a tree that's living in Walsh, Colorado. And if you've ever been to Walsh, Colorado, that's a hard place to be a tree. It's in far southeast Colorado. Anyway, there it is, ovipositing. And this one is a pretty common thing that is found in dying trees. It also has a very interesting parasitoid wasp that attacks it. And I may talk about that a little bit later. We can get into both of those a little bit more. Those are one of the 10 insects I put in. But then another thing that was interesting, got a lot of cicada killers. And cicada killers are a kind of wasp we call a hunting wasp. And hunting wasps are something I never have had time to talk about in Master Gardener. There's so many other things to talk about, but what hunting wasps are wasps that go and capture some kind of prey that they specialize in, paralyze it, and then haul it back to some sort of nest. And there's hundreds of hunting wasps in Colorado. But the big ones are the cicada killers, and they attack a large insect, the dog-day cicadas. So the prey would be the insect in the upper left. A dog-day cicada is a cicada that is found in the middle of summer, the dog days of summer. They're very noisy. They make a droning noise or the trees. This is a group of insects that has been historically very common in the Arkansas Valley, Pueblo, to Lamar. I mean, they've always been common there. They have been creeping northward. So now I even occasionally hear one in Fort Collins, but that's fairly recent. They don't exist. These big ones don't exist in Western Colorado. Anyway, their main natural enemy, or most spectacular one, are these cicada killer wasps. And these are wasps that will seek out a dog-day cicada. They will paralyze it, and then they will haul it back and put it into a hole they have previously dug in the ground. The hole they make is maybe 16 inches deep, and it has little side chambers. They pack the cicadas into the side chamber. When they've got enough to support one young, they lay an egg on it, and the young develops on the paralyzed cicada or couple of cicadas. And then they do it again and do it again. So the picture in the upper right is one on top of the mound. Picture on the lower right are cicadas that were taken from cicada killers as they returned to their tunnel. Anyway, these cicadas are no slouch. Cicada killers are no slouch in terms of size either. I mean, some of them are almost as big as the Asian giant hornet. Anyway, so on this Asian giant hornet thing, some things to keep in mind. I put out a rant on our Pest Talk listserv that you may be interested in joining, but shortly after the news article came out, and I could send that if you're interested. But anyway, basically, this is an insect. The rant was mostly this is just this is way out of control. People are way overreacting. This is an insect that's presently found in a tiny area of North America. It was found right in a little spot right on the Washington, British Columbia border and a little bit into British Columbia. They have spent, everybody and their brother has been looking for it all this summer. They found 2 queens. I mean, it's not a huge deal already. It's very likely it's going to get eradicated. The areas where this insect likes are moist forests. This insect does not hitchhike well. The only way it would get to Colorado is somebody would have to take it purposely and try to introduce it here. And if it was here, it would find Colorado to be hell. It is not going to live here. Extremely low chance it would ever get here, and very low chance it would even survive, and certainly would not thrive. This is not where it lives. There's a high likelihood it would not establish. I mean, we've got plenty of things to worry about. This is not something to worry about. But there is, if you want to know the current status on it, there's a great website. If you go to Washington State Department of Agriculture, do Asian giant hornet or something, do a web search. But Washington State Department of Agriculture has a website on this whole thing. And they have lots of information on it. They also have links to several really good videos. You want to see a really good video on this? The USDA did one on the response, what has happened. It's about 25 minutes long, but it's got excellent images. So if you want to know what's happening with that issue, check it out yourself. But don't go on the internet, not on this one. There's good sources of information on this. Okay, yeah, so Lisa, Katie, Carol, I'm done with that one. I can set up another one. Any questions come in that you want to answer?
Not specifically on the murder hornets, but we do have one on fire ants. And the question is, I'm far more worried about fire ants than murder hornets. Are they encroaching on Colorado? And is there anything we can do to keep them away if they are?
No, they're not encroaching in Colorado. I mean, and I don't think they will. I mean, so this, Colorado has some things that sting, but we're way under-endowed as a state in terms of good, high-quality vermin. It gets too cold in the winter, it's too dry, and there are very few states where you can find fewer stinging and biting insects of concern. I mean, mosquitoes, people worry about mosquitoes. Heck, I came from Minnesota. I was bitten by more mosquitoes in one night in St. Paul than I have in 37 years in Colorado. But people were get freaked about mosquitoes. Anyway, as for fire ants, no. The farthest north the fire ants are going to get is somewhere south of the Colorado border. They just don't survive in areas of such cold winters. So those get frozen out. I have seen them in Colorado, but where you see them are indoors. I mean, I saw them at the Denver Zoo in the tropical Discovery. I don't know. Anyways, a tropical house indoors. So it got moved in, and indoors it survived. But no, we don't have fire ants. The red imported fire ant. Thank goodness. That's a Texas Gulf state issue, and yeah, no, we don't have much. So yeah, so you're safe. You're living in the right place. You got away from fire ants.
And that's it for questions. So I think now we're pretty safe to move on to the next topic if you want to go to one of the top 10.
Okay, all right, I will then, let's see, new share. Let's see. So the next ones are more organized is for what the tale of 10 insects kind of topics that I have. And by the way, I mean, you've got recordings of this, but I will ultimately be posting, I post all my talks, pretty much all my talks as PDF at that website. So if you do want to see this or other things that I've been talking about, it's on that website. It's actually after Master Gardener section on the website. Anyway, so I picked a couple of things, and I thought I'd start with bees, although probably Lisa's already done this so well, but pick one bee. I thought I'd do the leafcutter bees, the family Megachilidae, as was pointed out. We have a huge number of bees, well over 900 species of bees in Colorado, and almost all are native. The notable exception being the honeybee that doesn't belong as a native in North America. We brought it over in the mid 1800s into Colorado. But the leafcutter bees are, I think, one of the more interesting of the native bees, although there's lots of interesting native bees. And there are dozens of species of leafcutter bees, and many kinds of plants are dependent on pollination by leafcutter bees. So when I look around in my yard and see what bees are on what plants, honeybees are on many things, but they're not on some things. And one thing that I see leafcutter bees on are certain kinds of legumes. So like my sweet pea is a plant that honeybees don't deal with. They can't, it's too much work for them to get the nectar. But if you see a leafcutter bee, they'll land on the flower and they push down to get to the nectar. And in the process, you'll see the anthers kind of go over them and they get smeared with pollen. So there you can see what happens. And then as they back out, that structure moves away. But the only way this appears and they can get the pollen is if they push on it. And that's what leafcutter bees do. So there's many kinds of plants that are dependent on leafcutter bees. And some crops are. A crop that is produced with leafcutter bees is alfalfa seed. If you want to grow the seed for alfalfa that is used to plant or sometimes to sprout for food, you need leafcutter bees. And I don't know if you've ever happened to notice some of these leafcutter bee boxes out in areas where they do alfalfa for seed, but they're kind of a big structure that has a roof, and inside there's going to be nest boxes that have little holes in them of various design, and they usually have a box or two per acre in a seed field. Where most of the alfalfa seed is grown is northern Wyoming, a little bit on western Colorado and Idaho. Now, all members of this family, the Megachilidae, are going to carry their pollen on the underside of their abdomen. So you might notice that. That's unlike a honeybee or a bumblebee. They carry on their hind legs in little pollen baskets, kind of looks like little saddlebags. So here we see a leafcutter bee collecting pollen. She dances around and kind of smears all the pollen on her belly and then carries it back to use as food for her young. So, and the other members of this family also do this. So the leafcutter bees get their name because almost all will use leaves cut to form nest cells. And it's a very distinctive kind of injury you'll see, and it occurs often on fairly limited number of plants. It's a smooth cut along the edge of the leaf, and this is all part of a series of steps that a leafcutter bee uses to establish a nest site. So the first step in leafcutter bee nesting and these are solitary bees that nest individually. Each mother is doing her own work. She finds or establishes a suitable nest site. She may find some rotten wood and excavate a tunnel in that. She might find a stem that is hollow and it might be good enough as is, or she might excavate it out a little bit more. There's a nest cell with pollen in a stem of a weed I once found. Or people provide nest boxes for these cavity nesting bees. In nature, soft rotting wood is often excavated for a nest site. The picture on the lower right, that was not a great picture, but that was my porch deck many years ago. And every spring I would see all this sawdust coming out of it, and I had some rotten boards, and that's where the leafcutter bees were nesting. If you were to look inside, they would make a tunnel, and the tunnel is what they're going to then use to create a series of nest cells, each made of leaf fragments and each packed with pollen and a little bit of nectar to support one developing young. So first of all, they've got some sort of cavities that they've made or found. And so here's, I changed my porch deck many years ago, and I don't have any bad boards in it anymore, but I do have some timbers in the backyard. I noticed this garden timber that had sawdust coming out the bottom, and watching, I would see leafcutter bees going in and out of this beam. Okay, so they've got they have a nest site, and then they have to make the nest cells that go in the nest site. So the leafcutter bees don't eat leaves. They use the leaves to fashion a nest cell. So the bee will visit a leaf of the right texture. They're usually pretty particular about this, and they will cut it. And this is a nice series of pictures by David Shetler from Ohio State. You will rarely see them doing this. It happens so fast. I mean, they land at the edge and kind of like an electric can opener. I mean, they go cutting, and within a minute it's cut, and then they're gone. So you rarely would see them do this. So they're cutting the fragments right here, and then they take it off. The kind of plants that they are going to feed on have to be of the right texture, right waxiness or hairiness. There are some that I see them most commonly using: roses, lilacs, Virginia creeper, redbud, ash sometimes, privet sometimes, but not every kind of plant. They have their favorites. Then they carry it back to the nest. So there's a bee carrying back a leaf fragment to that timber in my backyard that is got some tunnels in it. Then they use these. They fashion these leaf fragments into nest cells using multiple pieces of leaf fragments, and the smooth side is inwards. And they'll use a number of them to make, again, a cell, individual cells. So the B block on the lower left shows multiple cells exposed when this was pulled apart. Each cell is made of multiple pieces. Typically, there might be 3 to 4 rectangular pieces crimped to make the base. And then they'll build up the sides with some oval pieces along the side. Then they fill it full of nectar and pollen, enough to support one young, and then they lay an egg, and then they makes a little plug of pollen to support one young. So after they've done that, then they cut nearly perfect circles to cap it, several of those. And then when that nest cell is finished, repeat the process. Do it again and again and again. Maybe dozens of times to raise dozens of young. The young don't come out until the next year, but that's the typical life cycle of these. The young bees develop within the nest cell. They'll remain dormant, emerging as an adult the following year. And again, we have dozens, scores of species of leafcutter bees. One thing that may be limiting to the abundance of insects that need these cavities is available sites. So in nature, again, be some rotting wood that they could excavate, or maybe old boreholes or something. Well, a lot of yards don't have that, so you can use, you can provide it for them, and this has become very popular. And again, Lisa can keep you straight on all this with some of her wonderful fact sheets. So a variety, a typical thing might be some sort of a block that you would maybe drill. Could be wood, it could be a log, whatever, but a block of wood, and you drill. You drill different holes, and different kinds of bees and different kinds of hunting wasps will use these holes as nest sites. They're cavity nesters. One group of other related kind of bee that will use these nest sites will be mason bees. Mason bees are in the same family, but they don't cut leaves. Instead, mason bees use mud to make divisions in the cells and use mud to seal the cells. So a mason being someone who works with obviously cement and a mortar. So nest cells produced by mason bees in a hollow plant stem, again, would be separated by mud. They wouldn't be individual ones that were covered with leaves, or constructed out of multiple pieces of leaves. There are different hole sizes that can be attractive to different kinds of bees. People want to know what they might use. So something up to maybe as small as a 1/16 of an inch to even 5/8 of an inch. You'll get different kinds of things in it. One sheet that I like in terms of how to create a solitary bee hotel, and there are many sites on this, but I really like the one that Nebraska did on this subject. So you did Nebraska bee hotel, it should come up. So diameter, drill diameter up to 5/8 inch, not here I have circa, but up to 5/8 inch would be the biggest size to use, and different things will come in to different size ones. This is if you really get into this subject, you'll see some people will have them nest in straws, and then you can remove these with the nested bees in it. One last group of insects that's in this same family, the leafcutter bee family, the leafcutter bees, the mason bees, and the carder bees, are the carder bees. And these are a little bit different. They use plant hairs to create nest cells. So mason bees use mud, leafcutter bees use leaf fragments, mason bees use plant hairs. So where are you going to find carder bees? You're going to find them where there is a hairy leaf plant. A really common one would be stachys, lamb's ear. If you have that, you'll probably get carder bees. So the nests are made in existing cavities, so they might find a little crevice in the foundation of your house or someplace in a rock, among some rocks. Then they card the hairs off the leaf, and that's what they use to make a cell within which they will provision with the nectar, pollen, and then lay the egg. So the plant hairs are shaved and returned to the line and cushion the nest cells. You might see them sometimes nesting in an existing cavity like your bee block, in which case you'll see kind of this fuzzy material, the plant hairs. So if you want those, you want to plant some kind of hairy leaf plant. The wild weed that's, of course, hairy leaved would be mullein, woolly mullein, but most people don't want that in their yard. But stachys, plant stachys, you'll get these carder bees. Now, one thing about carder bees that's kind of interesting, and actually what got me first aware of them, is that the males aggressively patrol and defend their territory. And they will check out anything that looks like another male or anything that might be visiting the territory, and aggressively move towards it. And they may come after you. However, the only kind of bees that act aggressively of any kind in terms of defending a territory, a solitary bee like this that's out there away from the colony, is a male. male bees, males of many kinds of other insects may be much more aggressive in defending their territory, but male insects don't sting. If you've ever been stung by an insect, she did it. Male insects can't sting because the stinger that you have is a modified ovipositor, the structure that's used to lay eggs. In the insects that sting, that ovipositor has been repurposed to be a defensive stinger, so it's possessed only by the female. Anyway, so they'll bluff, they'll be in your face, they'll be a jerk, but they can't sting. They will also attack other bees. So the very first time that I was ever aware of wool-carder bees, I was asked a question by one of the agents who had noticed that on his plants, this one bee was attacking and killing honeybees, and they'll do that. These wool-carder bees, the males don't sting, but they have these stout spines on the underside of their abdomen. And if a honeybee comes into its territory, it may chase it, it may grab it, and may puncture it with those spines on the end and kill the honeybee. Anyway, maybe a little more action in your yard than you may wanted to know about. And in just finishing, and then you might have some questions on this, and I'll pull up something else. I just want to talk about this idea of a cut on the leaf edge, because it's a pretty distinctive kind of injury that you might see in a yard and garden, where the insect just confines the cutting to the leaf edge. If you see it really smooth and it's on specific kinds of plants, that's leafcutter bees. But one thing that people sometimes confuse it with are a different kind of more angular cut that's confined to the leaf edge, where it's more rectangular. And if you see that, that is caused by night-feeding weevils called root weevils. You don't see them in the daytime. They come out at night and just make angular little notches. We have a lot of night-feeding root weevils on many kinds of common plants: lilac, peony, privet, rose, euonymus. Anyway, but two different leaf edge cuts. I think if you had the Guess Who Came to Dinner talk, I went into all this in that too. So the leaf edge cuts, that's going to be caused by these night-feeding weevils. They hide at the base of the plant during the day. Okay, so that's it for that one. Any questions we have?
We do have a request, Whitney, that one of the topics you cover is Japanese beetle.
So Japanese beetle is a subject that is the most complicated topic we have. I mean, this is an insect that is both. It's two different insects. It's one kind of insect as a larva in the soil. It's another in the as the adult feeding. And what you do to manage it is very different, and there's a lot to it. Katie and Lisa and I were discussing this. We knew this would come up today, and I think what we would like to have is not to do that today, because it would take. I don't want to spend less than 50 minutes just on Japanese beetle, and at least half the people who are listening to this don't have Japanese beetle. But there's two things we could do, and Katie may jump in and say what might be the best way. One is Lisa did a nice job on this, and you can hear what she's done before, or I could do a webinar just on Japanese beetle if you want at the end of the, we're talking maybe the end of March or something. Either way, I'd love to talk. I've got to record something on Japanese beetle myself, so I could do that. I don't know, what do you want to say, Katie?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that Japanese beetle is in high demand. It's a hot topic, and it's something that deserves a longer time. And so Dr. Crenshaw is willing to do a standalone webinar just on Japanese beetle. We're gonna make that public, but we'll open it up to Master Gardeners and Green School participants first for early registration, because on a topic like this, it will fill. So, so that's kind of what we're hoping to do. Lisa does have a great talk on it, but something we talked about that it may be not a bad idea to have a standalone too this year.
Yeah. So you could link Lisa's to this group too. So
Correct.
Right. Okay. So let's handle it that way. Yeah. Again, yeah, that would be a good topic to cover, but again, we've got so much, so many bugs, so little time.
Dr. Cranshaw, before you move on from bees, we did have one question about what's going on, and I know this is a whole nother presentation in itself, but what is going on with bee population collapse? And I think they might be referring to colony collapse disorder, but maybe touch on the difference between the native bees and honeybees.
Well, colony collapse disorder is something that only affects the honeybee. And colony collapse disorder is one syndrome among several things that are affecting honeybees. I mean, honeybee populations have been in trouble for a lot of reasons. I mean, I've heard a lot of talks on this subject on why honeybees are in trouble, and got at least 10 things come up. The first any talk I hear, the first thing always starts with the varroa mite, which is a introduced a parasite of the honeybee that was never on a honeybee until the 1960s. Jumped from another bee. It's the day that happens, the worst day in the life of the honeybee and the planet. Then it spread around the country, spread around the world, excuse me. Jumped on it in the Philippines, it spread around the world. It kills honeybees directly. It spreads viruses. Pesticides are used to control it in hives. Those are having effects. And then you go into things like the North American honeybees are extremely inbred. I mean, we think of them as native, but they're livestock, and they are highly inbred. They've been bred for certain characters, and one of the characters is not ability to toxify toxins in the environment, and they're kind of wimpy, so they got to jack up the gene pool here in North America. Resources is a big thing. Anyway, I could go on and on. Basically, I would go to the bee health site. The extension bee health site is to start on this whole thing. There's so much on the topic. People have found an enormous amount over the last few years on how to improve honeybee health, and it is. I think the situation is getting a lot better than it was a few years ago. But other bees are in trouble. I mean, lots of bees are in trouble. The most common reason many bees are in trouble because of habitat destruction. People have destroyed habitat. They have destroyed host plants or destroyed nesting sites or whatever, and introduced parasites. And I mean, another good site, and maybe this is one where I would talk about tomorrow, is just I love the Xerces Society website. The Xerces Society with an XERCES. They're dedicated to issues on the conservation of arthropods in North America, and they have wonderful materials on conservation and enhancement of native insects. You talk about honeybee, they don't do honeybee because that's not a native. It competes with the natives, in fact. But anyway, that's a good site to go to. I don't know. Anyway, huge issue, but I think it's a lot better than it used to be before we knew what was going on, and found a lot of things that are problems, and people are addressing them. Okay, but extension bee health site, go there, try that to start with, and also check out Xerces Society. Okay, another topic, the Army cutworm. So the army cutworm is the most common cutworm in this part of the country. And what a cutworm is an insect that is usually active in spring, found in the soil. It lives in and around the soil, and will cut and feed on plants early in the year. And you go to different parts of the country, and there's a different suite of cutworms. But here it is almost entirely the army cutworm. And the army cutworm also has a unusual habit when it turns into the adult, as in that it migrates. It is the only moth that does a major migration. And when it migrates through Colorado, we call it the Miller moth. So this is army cutworm and the Miller moth. So army cutworm, the most common spring feeding cutworm in the region. It doesn't look like much. It's kind of a gray brown. There's one that's kind of crawling around on my back porch deck. So it's not much to look at. Most cutworms don't look like much. Develops on all manners of plants in the spring, mostly broadleaves, including alfalfa, winter wheat, various weeds. You can find it in gardens, but it's all over the eastern plains. It's also in western Colorado. And mostly, again, feeding on broadleaf plants in spring. They're caterpillars today. Today, they're probably feeding because it was warm enough to do some feeding, but they were dormant when it's too cold. And they'll feed more, and then towards the end of spring, they will finish their feeding. So these are cutworms. If you find some plants that have been chewed on, look around the base of the plant, and there it is. There's the little cutworm. So that plant next to it is a bean that had a little bit of cutting in it. Watch for it. This could be a bad cutworm year because we had a lot of army cutworm in 2020. It was a good year for them. Again, they mostly feed on broadleaves. Winter wheat, they're big in winter wheat, but they're usually taking out the broadleaf plants before they go to the wheat. I see they're a common cutworm in lawns, but I think they're probably more feeding on the clovers and the dandelions than they are on the grass. When they're full grown, the army cutworm pupates, and typical of many cutworms, it's kind of just a brown, pod-like thing. It's in the soil. You'd have to dig it out of the soil. Maybe this one's about 3/4 of an inch long in the soil, and that's transition stage. That's the pupa. Doesn't make a cocoon. The caterpillars that nest in the soil, they just live in a soil cell and are a naked pupa. They don't surround themselves with silk, and the silk would be the cocoon. And then they turn into the adult, and the adult is a typical size cutworm, and again, there's lots of them, and it's fairly variable in terms of color. But here'd be one. But what's unusual is that when it becomes an adult, it doesn't turn around and mate and lay eggs. It puts that all off for months. Instead, after they emerge in spring, they engage in a migration and head for the high country. So I'll get into that in just a sec, but let's talk about this term Miller moth. So the term Miller moth is applied to this insect very commonly. I use it all the time. I call the army cutworm the Colorado Miller moth. But the term Miller moth is not a scientific term. The term Miller moth is a popular term used to describe any kind of moth that is locally abundant. And why it's called a Miller moth? Someone moths have scales on their wings, and the scales easily dislodge. That little dusty material, that's the scales on their wing. Someone who mills grain is a miller, and you get flour on your clothing, and that's kind of like scales. So that's why they call it a Miller moth. But here, the Miller moth is the army cutworm. My brother in California, the Miller moth is some totally different kind of insect there. There's a Miller moth in Florida. It's a totally different insect there. But here it's the army cutworm. They have variable wing patternings. And what they do after they emerge in spring is follow flowers and stay cool. What they need is nectar to support themselves, but also they try to get fat. And they want to stay cool through summer because they are not going to lay eggs until late September and October. So they're coming out in late May, in June, then they follow flowers and they head for the mountains. And so this is an annual migration. They move from the plains to the mountains in May and June in eastern Colorado. There's a somewhat different situation in western Colorado. But these are flying from hundreds of miles, some of them. I mean, some of the ones that are crossing through your yard in Denver came from Nebraska or Kansas, plus that whole broad area of eastern Colorado. So the closer you are to the mountains, more of them are going to come through your yard. If you lived along the say in Julesburg in the far corner, northeast corner of the state, you'll get all the army cutworms that came from the county, but you also get the ones from Nebraska too. But you get into Sterling, you get all those, plus the ones from around Sterling. You get into Fort Morgan, you get all those, and the ones from Fort Morgan. You get into Greeley, you get all those from the ones from Greeley, and you get to Fort Collins, you get all the ones that, plus the ones from Fort Collins. The closer you are, the more you get. This is a little side note. One thing that I find that works, I think, when I want to know when the miller moths are coming into town, in my town, I look at the intersections, and if I see swallows dive bombing the intersections, that's to the day the miller moths are in town. There's lots of different kinds of theories on why you see all these swallows and dive bombing the intersections. You know, it's a big area, it's got lights, it's got no, it's because miller moths are being delivered via vehicles. They're in your chassis of your car. They're in your cab of your car. You open up the window and shoo them out. They come out of the bottom of your chassis, and when you stop at a light, and the swallows figure this out immediately, and they just start working those intersections. And then when the miller moths are gone, they go hunt somewhere else. Anyway, during the daytime, miller moths, the army cutworm moths, hide in tight, dark places, or dark places, and often crowd together. And this often leads them to getting into houses and vehicles. So it comes, you know, it's going to be light, so they hide. They get in a little crack and crevice, maybe around the door of your house, and then that leads to another little crack and crevice, and then boom, you know, somehow they got into the living room. But they can mass in quite large groups indoors. They stay dormant during the day and then fly around at night. They don't lay any eggs in the house. They're on their way to the mountains. They're not going to lay an egg until September, and they're going to lay it in a field. But they can be a significant nuisance. I mean, some people hate this. I mean, I've gotten emails from people asking, when are the miller moths coming through? Because I want to plan my vacation to not be in Colorado. So we don't have stinging insects, but we've got the best miller moths in the country. Some people, they're fine with spiders, but moths, they go nuts. Anyway, it's and it can be quite annoying, but they're just lost. It's not their fault anyway, but they're in the house. And then in the fall, they return to the plains, and you might see a lesser flight in the fall. And saw a fairly good one last fall, not huge, nothing like going in, but these can be big flights. I mean, here's an evening near Walsenburg last June, done by a guy who works with me, Tyler. That's miller moths. That's a heck of a night right there. So that's early June. I can't remember the date. And then here's like this little sign that went up related to that. At night, go out and you can see them feeding at flowers, and the kind of flowers they're feeding on might be fairly obscure flowers. I mean, things that you may not even know where's flowering. So like the one on the upper left, that's feeding on my burning bush euonymus. I mean, I didn't even really notice the flowers on that, but they are nectar filled and moths love them. That's my favorite plant for Miller moths, nectar feeding. And then spirea, they go for that. They're not going for the big flashy flowers. Moths usually go for white colored flowers. And there are some kinds of plants that they like. The big one is Russian olive. At the end of the year, if you wanted to have Miller moss in your yard, I would say plant a lot of Russian olive, or move somewhere where there's a lot of Russian olive nearby, because that's the last plant that's producing a lot of nectar that is being used by these Miller moths. And when that's out, there's not much left, and they all head for the mountains. But I think one of the reasons some people have problems with Miller moths more than other people in the same community is what kind of flowering plants you have in your yard during the time that they're passing through. There is a sheet. If you go to the Insect Information website, we have a Q&A. Every question people have ever asked me about Miller moths, I think it's about a 15-page sheet. And every year we have, I'm not sure if we'll continue this, but done a prognosis for the upcoming year. But there's a questions and answers about Miller moths. You can find that at the Insect Information website. And a photograph just was submitted today through Pest Talk, the listserv we have. These were found near Salida, so they're out and about. This could be a good year for Miller moths, meaning a lot. Not most people don't think that's a good year. Anyway, but last year was above average. The 4 years before that were well below average. But so many people had never seen it before who had moved here in recent years. But last year was a heck of a year. Who knows what this year will be like? Still too early to tell. But if there's a lot of cutworm activity in the gardens, then you're very likely to have a lot of Miller moths during the migration in June. Okay, so that's all I had for that one. I can bring up another one. Anything people want to ask questions about or discuss?
On a different note, we did have a question on coddling moths and pear trees. That's come up a couple times in the Q&A.
Yes, that's certainly a very that would be a good thing to talk about. Maybe I could do that tomorrow. That's not too long, but we got a great fact sheet on that. Everything I would say is in. We updated it not too long ago. It has how to monitor. But codling moth, for those who don't know it, codling moth is the most important tree fruit pest we have in Colorado. It is the one that is the worm in a wormy apple. But the fact sheet on that one is good and fairly updated. So for today, I would ask you to check that. I could maybe try to fit it in tomorrow morning. That's not too long. That might be a good topic. Yeah, but good fact sheet on that. Do work through those fact sheets, and I think you'll find a lot of things that are you may that answer a lot of the questions. I don't think many people are aware of how many sheets we do have on that subject, on the subjects of insects. The next thing I want to talk about, I think, is, excuse me.
And if earwigs might be a good one. Well, that's come up a few times as well. If you want to cover that one, if you don't have something already.
I could do earwigs. Let's do earwigs. Okay, I got that. That's one I have set up. Doesn't take too long. Okay. Now I need to find how to share. Okay, let's do earwigs. Okay, earwigs are a fairly straightforward topic. And although there is an order of insects called the earwigs, we only have one in Colorado, and it's not a native. It's the European earwig. So just if it's an earwig in the northern half of the US, it's the European earwig, non-native. It's been in Colorado since 1950 or so. Now, earwigs are very recognizable insects with a couple of features. They are going to have chewing mouth parts. They feed by chewing. They have long antennae, but the really short wing covers that don't completely cover the abdomen is fairly unusual. Most insects, their wing covers completely cover the abdomen. And then, of course, what most people end up looking at are those scary looking pincers on the hind end, the forceps or pincers. Now they do have wings underneath those short wing covers. They have wings that fold, but the European earwig does not fly. It has wings, but has lost the ability to fly. And this is the only time I have ever seen in my entire life an European earwig wings out and about. There was one night I was out taking pictures in the garden at night because there's so much cool action at night. And this one earwig was doing this, but never before have I seen the wings come out. Other earwigs can fly, but the European earwig, the one we have, has lost the ability to fly, although it still possesses wings. They're just non-functional. Now, the cerci on the hind end, the forceps, whatever you want to call them, the pincers, are look scary, but they're fairly weakly muscled. They're used to grasp the mate by the male. They can be used to manipulate prey, capture prey, and move it because they're fairly flexible in that regard. But they don't pinch you with this. I mean, try to pinch yourself with these. You can barely feel it. On the front end, they've got little jaws, and they've got pretty good jaws. They can give you a little tiny nip with the front end, their mouth, but that scary looking hind end is not what you're gonna not to worry about it. I know it looks pretty fearsome. By the way, the European earwig or all earwigs, those forceps are different between the sexes. So male earwigs have bowed cerci, so they're decidedly bowed, whereas the females they're straight. Cerci are straight. So the only reason really to remember that it is an exceedingly easy insect to sex, but now you can say, look, there goes a female earwig, and people are impressed if you can sex an insect as it's walking across the flower or something, and they'll think you're a master gardener if you can tell them what sex it is, I think. So again, males have got bowed cerci, females have straight cerci. Now they have a kind of interesting life history. They overwinter as adults. The female overwinters and lays eggs in spring now. She's probably already laid the first clutch of eggs. They will lay eggs in areas that are protected, like a little cavity under a rock, or they love mulch beds. I mean, shredded bark mulch beds. I mean, so they find a little cavity in there and they'll lay a clutch of eggs. And the mother then stays with those eggs. This is rare. She'll stay with the eggs until they hatch. She'll stay with the eggs after they hatch. The young will stay with her for a couple of molts after this. This is a really unusual behavior for an insect. I mean, where you see maternal care like this. I mean, most insects, forget the males. I mean, they're out of the picture, but the females just dump the eggs and run. But this is a rare example of an insect that shows a fair amount of maternal care. So I know people don't like earwigs, but this is an insect. This is a model of family values in the insect world. Anyway, you're not going to like it. I know. Anyway, but one of the other things you should know about earwigs is their habits are that they are omnivores. I can't think of any insect that you'd find in your yard that is more completely omnivorous than an earwig. They eat plants, but they eat lots of insects, aphids, insect eggs, little tiny caterpillars. they're out feeding on, some petals, leaves and petals, but they are also one of the top predators of insects, garden insects. In fact, they've been used to control aphids and fruit pests, including codling moth. Um, uh, so, when people try to separate the world into good bugs or bad bugs, which is all too often how they do it, I look at the earwig. I mean, it's not. What do you mean by good bug? What do you mean by bad? It hurts a plant or it helps a plant? I mean, is that what you mean? This feeds on plants and it eats bugs that feeds on plants. You can't pigeonhole it. It's the most omnivorous insect that I'm aware of, certainly that occurs in Colorado. Eats plants, eats lots of bugs. The feeding that they do is at night, so you do not normally see them doing this. So you have to go out at night just to see all this action. The kind of damage they do is often around the edge, but it's not a real distinctive kind of feeding. Some plants they like better than others. In my yard, I happen to have some mallow, common mallow, as well as some cultivated mallows. They really like that. That's where I often get tipped off that I've got some earwig action as I look at the mallows being all chewed up. They do get into flowers and they will feed on the petals. So that's often one of the big things that people find that is a problem with them. So that is certainly a real issue, and a really big flower that provides a lot of cover. They like tight, dark, moist places. So some flowers they really like a dahlia. Oh my gosh, that'd be heaven. But there they are feeding on flowers at nighttime, various kinds of flowers. These are all nighttime pictures. The other thing about the earwig that gets them in trouble is just a habit they have of hiding during the day in these tight, dark places. They have a habit called thigmotactic behavior, which means essentially they want to be touched in as many points of their body as possible. And they like it dark. So they get into stuff. So that then that gets them into stuff. So they find a tight dark crevice and they end up in the house or outdoors. I've got a hammock and I open up the hammock and at the edges where it comes together, earwigs spill out. They might be along the edge of the doorway in the morning, and I open up the door and earwigs fall out. That's where they like to hide. They also sometimes are at the scene of a crime and get blamed for stuff. I mean, you find a hole in an apple that was caused by a codling moth. That's what did it. You open up that apple, you might find an earwig in that apple. The earwig didn't make the hole. It's using the hole. It may have eaten the thing that made the hole, but people see an earwig in the fruit. Or a borehole. You see a hole in a tree and you poke in. What did that hole in there? Poke in, earwigs come out. They didn't make the hole. They made they're using the hole as a place to hide. So anyway, I'm trying to be a earwig booster here. Earwigs have increased as a problem. Again, these have been here since the 1950s, but for maybe the first 20 years when I was here in Colorado, this is probably mostly, I'd only hear about earwigs as a problem in gardens in the high country, upper elevation communities. But that changed, and now it's a very common problem in the lower elevations, including where I live in Fort Collins. And I've thought about this, and I've discussed this with others who have seen the same kind of thing. And the best theory that we have on why earwigs are more common is we're providing better nesting habitat in the form of using a lot more mulches than we used to. These shredded bark mulches are excellent for nest sites. When we didn't have them, they wouldn't nest as successfully. So that's my best guess on why there are more now than there used to be. There's several other kinds of things that also increase when we have a lot of mulch. I'm not saying don't use mulches. There's the benefits way outweigh the negative aspects of that. But you do something there, it changes things, and some insects are favored by these mulches. The situation with earwigs is discussed in a fact sheet, an extension fact sheet on European earwigs. Again, the only one that we have. And in it, it talks about what insecticides can work and things like that. And it also talks about trapping. And a trap you could try for earwigs might be one that is based on trying to provide them cover for the daytime. They're looking for a tight, dark place to hide. Give them a tight, dark place to hide. Kind of rolled up newspaper, moist rolled up newspaper, or what we did in trials was use corrugated cardboard rolled in a little tube. Furthermore, to improve this as a trap design, put some food in there. Looked at a couple of things. Rolled corrugated cardboard, crumpled newspaper could be used to attract them, but adding either a bit of wheat bran or wheat germ greatly increased the number of earwigs that would be in those traps. Now, these are ways to get a whole lot in a site, in this nest site or the refuge that they have. But then you have to do something about it. If all you have is moistened rolled up newspapers of wheat bran around, and you're not dumping them into soapy water in the morning, all you're doing is providing them bed and breakfast. So you have to do something about that. But then there's vegetable oil. You can try vegetable oil. A little in a sunken cup, that can be effective. I have not been able to do it very successfully in my yard because I've got so many varmints running around at night, skunks and raccoons that keep tipping everything over. But I did it years ago at my brother-in-law's. The first time I was ever able to try this out in LA in April. Huge numbers of earwigs there. And all he had was these little cups, and all he had was canola oil is what he had. And so that's the only oil I had. And I put these cups out, and in one night, I caught over 450 European earwigs in those little cups. So, and that way, they're dead. You don't have to do anything else. I guess you could maybe wok fry them or something if you wanted, but then they're taken care of. So there's other oils that have been recommended, and you might want to try some of those too. So again, I'll be posting all of these later, but that's all I have on earwig. I think we're probably pretty much at the end of our time, aren't we, Katie?
Yes, we're almost there. So I think let's ask Lisa and Carol if there's any questions outstanding that we should have you answer live. And then what I'll go ahead and do is open up the chat, and people can type in if there's a specific pest, insect, or other arthropod that they're hoping is covered tomorrow.
Yeah, we had a couple questions on earwigs. One person asked, just plain vegetable oil to lure the earwigs or canola oil?
I think lots of oils will probably work. The only time I've been able to do it was canola oil. Originally I'd heard fish oil, but I don't think you need fish oil. Try some different oils. I mean, also another thing that has been recommended, and I've not had a chance to look at it, is soy sauce as an attractant, as another bait. I don't know. Try them, and let people know. Do little experiments. Put out a couple of different things. Count them. Again, I try to do this in my yard. I certainly have earwigs, but again, the skunks drink them and they eat them, so I can't do it at home. I don't know where to do it. So. Master gardeners can do these kind of things. Maybe you could get credit for it. Do a little experiment. Yeah, I could help you with that if you want.
Okay, the next question is it good to have earwigs in the compost bin? I have found quite a few in my compost bin.
Well, they're not bad. They're probably eating, all sorts of little things are around a compost bin, little kinds of flies and midges and stuff. So they're just probably finding lots of food, and it's nice and moist. So it's not going to hurt the compost. They're eating some of the bugs that are developing in the decaying organic matter, I suppose. But not bad one way or the other.
Okay, and here's a fun one. Would you recommend fried earwigs as a snack?
I did not try it. I've tried several things, but I've never tried earwigs. I should have done it when I had those ones in San Francisco. Maybe I'll do that now that I'm retired, and I could do that. I don't think they don't have any unpleasant defensive compounds or odors. I don't know. Maybe I'll do that. If I do, I'll let you know.
Okay, and we had one person comment saying they used olive oil in a sunken trap last summer with a couple of drops of soy sauce, and it worked wonders.
Excellent. Good. Yes. That's what we like to hear.
And the last one related to earwigs is, why are they attracted to the oil?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't even make something up on that one, but they are. So what we have to find is what they are attracted to. And how do I keep earwigs out of my ears of corn silk still in the stock? I don't know. They can. I mean, they do some chewing in there, and they're. But that's a perfect little microhabitat. They love sweet corn silk. So I don't know. I mean, if you could prevent them from crawling up, with some kind of barrier, I guess you could do that. You could spray the silk with insecticide. That would help, but most people don't want to do that. But earwigs get into stuff. I've got an earwig story I got to tell too. We have a vacation. We're running a vacation rental, and we like to put the sheets out on the back line for people, and I like to put them on a clothesline. And we got some complaints about earwigs in the house, and I couldn't figure out how they get in the house. Earwigs got into the sheets on the clothesline. I mean, this is a clothesline. It's a pole. They're 50 feet apart. There's a pole they got to and then they got to crawl along a little wire, and then they get in the sheets. So if you ever put your clothes on a clothesline, bring them in before dark, or you'll get earwigs. You'll be bringing earwigs into your house. So anyway, they just get into stuff. It's not their fault though. I mean, they're just anyway. It's not malicious. They just do.
Okay, and there are more questions. Katie, do we have time for more?
It's really up to you all. Whitney, do you have more time to hang out and answer more questions? Yeah. Okay, so we'll see what we can get through, but we don't typically go too far over, just to respect everyone's time. We will keep the recording running though.
So I see a question here on grasshoppers. I'm in the plains every year. Is my garden's looking good? They descend and eat everything. Is no-low bait worth the high price? So no-low bait is the biological control you have. It is not a miracle product, and it produces a disease of grasshoppers. You're aware of the bait, obviously, but it produces a disease that causes a stress, and as a result, it has to be applied only against young grasshoppers. It is not going to affect adult grasshoppers, because one of the biggest kind of stresses that will cause them to die if they are infected by this no-low bait, the organism in that, is molting. When insects molt, they're terribly stressed. And if they're weakened by the infection of Nosema locusti, which is the organism, then they will die during a molt. But if they're an adult, forget it. It's totally worthless. You need to do a lot of different things for grasshoppers, and that'd be a good talk too. That's a complicated subject. But if we never do get to talk about grasshoppers, I want everybody to go research the Rocky Mountain locust. Look up the Rocky Mountain locust. The Rocky Mountain locust was a plague locust. In the 1870s, it created a cloud of grasshoppers. over the Great Plains, including eastern Colorado, that was bigger than all of New England and much of the mid-Atlantic states, the biggest cloud of locusts ever seen on the planet. And that insect is extinct. Within 30 years, humans drove it to extinction. The only pest insect in the history of the planet driven to extinction, the Rocky Mountain locust. Great story. One of the best entomology stories of the region. Rocky Mountain locust. Go check that out. But we still have grasshoppers. Got about 120 kinds of grasshoppers. So yeah, we have a pretty good fact sheet on that one too. That got updated not too long ago. Grasshoppers in the small acreage, garden and small acreage, I think it is. So check that out too.
Okay, and I am kind of cataloging. Some other people have written in about pill bugs, roly-polies, that they're seeing more of those. So that may be something we can cover tomorrow. I don't know if it got brought up tonight, but yellow jackets is typically a hot topic too, because it's such a nuisance pest.
We have a question on paper wasp control too.
Well, so social wasps that we have, there are, I break them into three main groups. We have yellow jackets, and they are by far the most important stinging insect in the region, particularly one called the western yellow jacket. And we could talk about that maybe as a topic tomorrow. The other really common insect with a totally different habit is the European paper wasp. And that's a game-changing insect. So you know what I should do? You know what I'm going to do, Katie? I don't want to do that one tomorrow, but this afternoon, one of the talks I was giving was just wasps. Mm-hmm. So why don't I just record the wasp thing that I did, and that will get into yellow jackets. It will get into hunting wasps. It will get into. I'll repeat a little bit about the Asian giant hornet, but I'll record that and make that available because I did it this afternoon, and I'll tweak it a little to correct the things, and I can knock that off.
I think that'd be great. I hope that our participants are getting the sense that this topic is huge and there is just so much to cover. And since this is an introduction to horticultural entomology, we're only touching the surface here. And so I think that's what's so challenging about the topic is that there's just a lot of diversity. And it changes over time. It changes a little bit year to year, and then there's the sensationalized pests and bugs that come into play, and they may not be relevant to our gardening situation here in Colorado. So hopefully everyone understands that there's a lot here, and so I appreciate if you could make anything else available. It's folks who love this stuff and they want more and more. So I appreciate it. But I will also give a pitch that you teach some excellent classes through CSU that are available, for people to take. And, even the 4 credit courses are not hefty and not overly costly either.
So it's a 3-part class I teach. Called horticultural entomology, and there's an introduction, and that goes for 5 weeks, and then there's horticultural entomology food crops, that's for 5 weeks, and then horticultural entomology landscape plants, so that's turf and trees and shrubs and flowers.
Essentially, it's a very challenging task to condense all of that, right? 16 weeks of courses into one course in green school. So just an introduction for everybody, but hopefully we have a good sense of where to start tomorrow. It will be different curriculum tomorrow, so you're welcome to join us live tomorrow morning from 9 to 10:30 or watch the recording. Both will be posted in Canvas, so all green school participants will have access to those. And if there's any supplemental short courses or webinars that we're able to offer, we'll certainly let you all know about that as well. So with that, I think we will go ahead and end for tonight. Whitney, is there anything else you wanted to wanted to say or leave our participants with tonight?
Nope, I think, yeah, and I'll get some ideas for tomorrow morning, so we'll be back, do some more. So normally this is nothing. Normally we do this for 6 hours.